Yesterday, Father James Mawdsley posted a video on his YouTube page attacking the servant of God, Luisa Piccarreta. Here today, I'll be addressing and refuting his claims. But first, let's cover a quick intro to who Luisa is, although any of my longtime subscribers, of course, already know. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Servant of God, Luisa Piccarreta. Luisa was an extraordinary Italian mystic who was born in the year 1865. She received thousands of pages of revelations from Jesus and Mary over the course of decades of her life, spent bedridden and miraculously subsisting on the daily Eucharist alone for food. The chief promoter of her work during her life was none other than the priest who was appointed by the Archbishop to be Luisa's spiritual director. That priest is one we now know today as Saint Hannibal di Francia. Oops, I'm rotating the pages again instead of switching them. There we go. Saint Hannibal di Francia. Now, Saint Hannibal was not merely someone who believed in the authenticity of Luisa's revelations. He dedicated the later years of his life to promoting them. They became his life's mission. And not only that, he was appointed by the Archbishop to be Luisa's censor librorum. And he bestowed 19 of his own nihil obstats to Luisa's volumes. And the Archbishop gave his imprimaturs to all of these as well. These are, so those who are confused, maybe hearing the naysayer saying, oh, that doesn't mean anything. No, it certainly does mean something. These are forms of church approval. Now, it's true, they aren't constat de supernaturalitates, but that's irrelevant. Those declarations are never given to these types of cases. Not even St. Faustina's revelations have that. Those declarations, a constat de supernaturalitate, a declaration from the church saying this is of supernatural origin, that's for, the more typical traditional apparition styles like Fatima or Guadalupe. Luisa's mysticism is not like that. It's thousands of pages of incredibly deep and long mystical theology. And by the way, Luisa was just a completely uneducated, ordinary Italian laywoman from the 20th and 19th century. She could not have possibly, with her own intellect, written a single page of these 10,000-page-long revelations, which go into detail on the deepest theology that you will find anywhere outside of the Bible. Anyway, let's take a look at what St. Hannibal di Francia said here. I want you to know that since I have totally dedicated myself to the great work of the divine will, I practically don't concern myself at all with my institutes. He wrote this just before his death. He was this extraordinary worker of great apostolates. He founded an order and orphanages and schools, and of course that remained important to him. But basically he realized, and this was not just a brief thing right before his death, this was many years, over a decade, where he realized that these revelations of Jesus to Luisa Piccarreta, his spiritual directee, this was everything. So much so that he wrote, this is a mission so sublime that no other can be compared to it. That is the triumph of the divine will upon the whole earth in conformity with what is said in the Our Father. Kind of a big deal. And this is a canonized saint saying this. And if you doubt that this is a canonized saint saying this, you can look it up for yourself and you can find that it is indeed him. Let's switch cameras here. I've got here on my on the side of my desk, The Son of My Will. This is the Vatican's official biography of the servant of God, Luisa Piccarreta, and you will find in there confirmed all of these quotes that I'm going to share with you. And I've got them detailed at my one of my websites, sonofmywill.com. Anyway, back to the screen share here. So, even if someone might try to absurdly claim that this astounding, unbelievably deep theology that we see in Luisa's writings could have proceeded from her intellect, one thing certainly could not have proceeded, even theoretically, possibly one thing could not have proceeded from her intellect. And that is knowledge of the future, because no one knows the future. Even the demons do not know the future. So I know some people will try to go there, oh, okay, it wasn't from Luisa herself, it was from demons. Nope. They don't know the future either. Only God does. But Luisa's revelations contain more fulfilled prophecies than any other private revelation in the whole history of the church. I say that with a fair degree of confidence, having read a huge amount of them myself. I've never seen one compilation of them have so many already fulfilled prophecies. I cover some of them in my 2021 book, Thy Will Be Done, and I'll plan to put up more videos here soon talking about even more of them, so please subscribe. But anyway, this is not my assessment merely. Saint Hannibal, as you see here on the screen, Saint Hannibal himself said in I think it was 1927 he wrote this, it might have been a little bit before. He said, there are chapters in Luisa's revelations which foresee divine scourges, earthquakes, wars, fire, cloudbursts, devastation of lands, epidemics, famines, and the like. Everything has been predicted several years before, and everything has come about. And much yet is left to come about. This was what St. Hannibal himself wrote about the prophecies in Luisa's revelations, and he only saw a fraction of them fulfilled. Being that he died in 1927, I think it was, he didn't see all the fulfillment of the countless prophecies in Luisa where Jesus clearly told her, okay, you got this world war, but they're going to do this and this and this, and another one's going to come. You know, everybody knows about Fatima predicting World War II, and indeed, Our Lady did predict World War II at Fatima. But it was predicted before that and repeatedly and even more clearly in the revelations of Jesus to the servant of God, Luisa Piccarreta. But even only seeing a fraction of a fulfilled prophecy, St. Hannibal said, yep, this in these revelations, everything it says is going to happen, it happens. Okay. Moving along here. Saint Hannibal was not the only saint who knew Luisa and knew that she was the real deal. Saint Padre Pio also strongly and repeatedly endorsed her. Let me switch to that page here. This is all of these quotes are also from the Vatican's official biography of Luisa, published in 2016. So I know there's bogus quotes supposedly from Padre Pio floating around out there. I've spoken against him in the past, but these endorsements of Padre Pio of Luisa we have repeatedly in writing with the names of the people who gave them, and there is absolutely no doubt about it. Luisa and Padre Pio, of course, they were both Italians. They lived at the same time. They didn't meet in person. Luisa, she was bedridden, but they corresponded through Federico of Brescia, and Padre Pio knew all about Luisa's revelations. You can see some of them on your screen right here. To try to not make this video too long, I won't read through all of them, but all of this is indeed taken directly from the Vatican's official biography of Luisa. Even Pope St. Pius X himself endorsed these revelations. Now, this we don't have on as clear an authority as St. Hannibal and Padre Pio's endorsement of Luisa, but we do have it on a pretty well-documented authority. As you can see there on your screen, Father Bernardino Giuseppe Bucci, he was alive during Luisa's life, he lived in Italy, and his aunt was close to Luisa, and he actually visited Luisa, and Luisa herself prophesied. He went into Luisa's room, and Luisa pointed to him and said, he was just a little boy at the time. He said, he will be a priest. And here you can see the priest, Father Bucci. That's exactly what happened. Anyway, according to his approved biography of Luisa, yet another approved biography of the servant of God, which has the imprimatur, he relayed something that's Pope St. Pius X, the Pope who, in addition to Pope Leo XIII and other popes, gave explicit permission for Mass to be said every single day in Luisa's room, which was extraordinary at the time. But they directly gave this permission. And when Pope St. Pius X was brought Luisa's revelations, he said to St. Hannibal de Francia, so St. Hannibal de Francia, Father Hannibal de Francia, he knew the Pope, he knew tons of extraordinary souls in his day, and he counted the Pope among his friends as well. And the Pope said to Father Hannibal, "Dear Father, you must read these writings on your knees, because it is our Lord Jesus Christ who is speaking in them. And that's a direct quote from the biography, which has the imprimatur written by Father Bucci, who has a direct connection to Luisa. So, back to Luisa herself. For 40 years, Luisa conversed with Jesus and wrote down the revelations that he gave her. She suffered more than you can possibly imagine. She was a victim soul, the likes of which church history rarely sees, although some others like her have been seen, but she was an extraordinary case. But despite all of these sufferings, which are detailed in her writings, her obedience and her humility was always perfect. She didn't think anything about herself at any point. She always followed all of the orders of her spiritual directors, who were always appointed over her by the Archbishop. All of this, every single detail of this whole phenomena, was carefully governed by the authority of the church and of priests. This is another extraordinary phenomena. She couldn't even move a single finger in the morning until a priest came and blessed her in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And at that moment, she was miraculously restored to motion. She still couldn't get out of bed. She was bedridden her whole life, but she could move and, speak and write. Until that happened, every morning she was rigid as a block of lead. Several strong men couldn't even move her until a priest came to bless her. And that phenomenon, there have been other mystics like Luisa who lived on nothing but the Eucharist for many years. But no other mystic has had this phenomena, where a priest had to come in every morning to bless her, to miraculously restore her to motion. Anyway, when her mission was done, she breathed her last on March 4th, 1947. And here we have her funeral, her death and funeral, also covered in the biography, The Son of My Will, published by the Vatican. And you can find more on sonofmywill.com. 77 years since then, as we are standing here in 2024 now, 77 years since Luisa's passing, has only seen her legacy of holiness and the fruits of her mysticism continue to flourish and continue to expand. On the Feast of Christ the King, the year 1994, her cause of canonization was opened, and this gave her the title of the Servant of God. But that's not all. Some apologists out there have misrepresented the nature of what's been happening with her cause, because in 2005, Luisa's diocese completed its phase of the process of her canonization, and her diocese declared her holiness and orthodoxy, and they handed her cause on to the Vatican, where it is to this day, and mark my words, she will in time, soon enough, be declared a saint. So Luisa being a servant of God, this isn't some procedural step as certain career lay apologists have tried to portray it as. No, at this point, since 2005, this is an ecclesiastical declaration from the Archbishop of her diocese regarding her holiness and her orthodoxy. And after that, in the year 2012, Archbishop Piccarreta, who issued that declaration also, he issued another declaration. And he said, I wish to address all those who claim that these writings contain doctrinal errors. This to date has never been endorsed by any pronouncement by the Holy See, nor personally by myself. I would like to note that in this way, in addition to anticipating the legitimate judgment of the Church, these persons cause scandal to the faithful. So he's pointing out that people who are saying that Luisa's writings contain errors, the Church, this has been contradicted by the only competent ecclesial authority. And it is within the rights of no mere individual theologian or priest or layman to claim that these writings contain errors when the Church has said otherwise. So there's he's absolutely right, of course. It's egregious for any individual to take that task upon himself. These writings contain, they bear nihil obstats from a canonized saint. St. Hannibal de Francia, as we noted a minute ago, he gave 19 of his own nihil obstats to these revelations. And in each case, they were followed up with by an imprimatur from the Archbishop. And of course, her diocese has since declared her holiness and orthodoxy, and she is a servant of God. Now, of course, these attacks have been made already. We can't undo what has been done, and I will indeed respond to them in this video in the minutes ahead. I will, however, first note that I already have responded to all of them. Just see the appendices of any one of the 3 books on the Divine Will that I've already published. For example, The Crown of Sanctity, my huge book on the Divine Will, And I thought I had it right here next to me. I guess I don't. Anyway, you can find the PDF of that free on my website, dsdoconnor.com. Just go and download the PDF. You will find all of the attacks against Luisa responded to in there. I will, however, specifically respond to a few more today here. More attacks are also bound to come. Why? Because the devil hates these revelations. He is not going to stop whispering into the ears of certain good Catholics to encourage them to condemn these revelations, and many will sadly listen to him. I'll respond to them whenever I can find the time, but I'm sure I won't always have that time. So please remember, whenever the new slew of attacks come out, and they'll continue until the divine will reigns on earth, that Jesus says to judge the tree by its fruits. He doesn't say spend the rest of your life obsessing over quibbles that every theologian brings up. If that was our approach, we would never have listened to a single private revelation ever in the whole history of the church. We wouldn't have the Rosary or the Sacred Heart Devotion or the Immaculate Heart Devotion or Fatima or Divine Mercy or any of that. In fact, we'd look a lot more like Protestants. And when it comes to the clear and obvious and undeniable fruits of Luisa's own life and of her revelations, if you remember nothing else I say today, remember this. There has not been a single mystic or private revelation in the entire history of the church who has seen even anywhere close to the verifications of authenticity that Luisa has, only to be later proven a fraud. And I said that in a talk 5 years ago. There were hundreds of people in front of me, and I held up $500 in cash, and I said, this is yours. If you just come up to the podium right now, and this is on my YouTube channel still to this day, and still no one has taken me up on this. This is yours. If you can show me a single mystic who has seen these verifications of authenticity that Luisa has, but who actually was just a fraud. 5 years later, many, many, many thousands of views later, no one has taken me up on that. Why? Because there is no such mystic. Because that will never happen. It never has happened, and it never will happen. Luisa is authentic. This is a fact. Every single solitary person who has ever been in the appropriate position to judge her revelations, I should say, has vouched for the authenticity of them. And it's not just Saint Hannibal de Francia. Every single one and Luisa lived to be 82 years old, so she was appointed many spiritual directors during the course of her revelations. St. Hannibal de Francia distinguished himself as the most zealous promoter of them, but she had many other priests who were appointed, theologians, priests who were appointed by the archbishop to be her spiritual director. Every single one became convinced of the authenticity and the urgency of her revelations. And here's the prefect for the Congregation for the Causes of Saints under Pope St. John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI. He wrote in the preface to the Vatican's official biography of Luisa, he wrote a preface strongly endorsing Luisa and her revelations from Jesus. He said that this living in the divine will is indeed the actual way that the Son Jesus lived on earth, bringing here with him the life of heaven. And again, that's right there in the preface to this book. You can see it. I'm showing you on the screen my physical copy of the book with his preface right there. Okay. This is Cardinal Jose Saraiva Martins. He, of all the people on the face of the planet, I mean, if there's a single man on the face of the planet who knows what makes a saint, an authentic mystic, a valid private revelation, it's him. And he is fully endorsing this. The fruits have continued to this day, though. There's already multiple approved Catholic religious orders dedicated to Luisa's revelations. Let me share with you one on the screen. The Benedictines of the Divine Will. If you're looking for a reliable resource in the Divine Will, solid teachings, look no further than them. Mother Gabrielle Marie, the Benedictine Daughters of the Divine Will, is also Benedictine priests starting up. They were approved as a religious order in Italy in 2011, and now they're starting up a monastery here in America. They are the holiest and most pious and devout and wonderful religious you will find anywhere. I've met many of them, and I can vouch to that personally. But it's not just the religious orders There have been many priestly vocations inspired by these revelations. There have been conversions, lives of prayer renewed, complete changes of life, good works. Personally, I have had elderly priests come to me, contacting me, saying that after they delved into these divine will revelations, that they realized that this was the thing that they were looking for their whole life. One priest who said this to me was in his 90s, and he had been ordained since he was a very young man in his 20s. And he said, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. I have had actual seers contact me, people who are audibly hearing from Jesus Christ himself every day, and they have told me, after diving into these divine will revelations as given by Jesus to Luisa Piccarreta, that this blew them away and propelled their spiritual lives far beyond what they ever had been before. These are mystics who are hearing from Jesus to this day. And this set of pages, this hunk of text from Jesus to Luisa, completely changed everything for them. I've been traveling all over North America for over a decade, attending and speaking at Divine Will conferences. I have met thousands of followers of this spirituality. They have been the most holy and joyful and devout and Orthodox Catholics that I've found anywhere. I've traveled in just about every Catholic circle that exists, and yet I see these fruits among the Divine Will followers above all. Now, yes, there is a tiny fraction of Divine Will promoters who promote completely bogus and outlandish propositions that are completely at odds with Catholic orthodoxy. Now, of course, this is a problem. It needs to be addressed. So if you've come across any of their writings online or in social media or even in person, please see this article that I put on my website some time ago, directed at them. Direct this article to them, and please make sure that you take it seriously as well. Divine Will Orthodoxy, you can find this on my website, dsdoconnor.com. I go through a number of these bogus things they're saying, which are not actually from Jesus' revelations to Luisa. They are misinterpretations. I prove that with detailed quotations from Luisa's volumes themselves. So anyway, but these outlandish, bogus promoters of the divine will, this is a minuscule fraction of the divine will movement. And we have to realize what we're dealing with here. Every true movement originated by the grace of God, every true movement willed by God has its crazy followers who risk damaging the whole thing. But wise people, honest people, they will not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Anyone who's going to condemn an entire movement because of a few crazy people within it, they're also going to have to condemn every single private revelation we've ever had and every Catholic apostolate that has ever existed. And not to mention the Catholic Church itself. All right. Luisa is authentic. This is a fact. It's a truth that anyone who has even a single ounce of interest in a humble and a sincere application of Catholic discernment will realize it very quickly. And it is a truth that I would die for. And I want to ask Luisa's critics and slanderers this. Would you die in defense of your attacks against her? Don't think so. But I will respond to the specific accusations. Here is what Father Mawdsley, as I said, I'd respond to what he's saying. I've laid out for you why we can be absolutely certain Luisa's authentic, and really no one should be attacking her, but people do, and I will respond to them. So let me go ahead and share what Father Mawdsley has just put up on his YouTube page against Luisa. Okay, here it is.
Pentecost and on Calvary were Jewish. But it's absolutely false to say the first 15. Most of them were Roman or Greek. Mm-hmm. And Eusebius didn't say that. I'd be amazed if...
Oh, sorry, I clicked on the wrong spot. Let me just fast forward that a bit.
And Our Lady and the Church. Then you go into this sick magic Kabbalah from the devil, because he is very, very clever. And the third time about the divine will devotion, in their act of consecration, it's all about submitting yourself to the light, this light. It's Lucifer. And he's the sovereign will in which all other wills are meant to dissolve. It's like the Zohar. It's disgusting. Jesus had two wills, divine will and human will, and they never melded into one, which is a heresy.
Yeah.
And yet this divine will devotion wants us all. It says your humanity, your heart and your intellect basically melt away, and the divine will takes over. That's Lucifer. That's his totalitarian program.
Possession.
Yeah.
It's
And
possession.
this is
Humans.
I know there's very good Catholics who love this devotion. They think it's awesome. And Luisa Piccarreta's spiritual director has been canonized under John Paul II. But we know that the Secretary of State, Sodano, was defending McCarrick and Martial at that time.
Oh, man.
So what other evils are coming into the church by that?
All right, let's pause it right there. Let's talk about that. So this is, according to Father Mawdsley, this is sick magic Kabbalah from the devil. It's Luciferian. It's disgusting. There's so much ridiculous absurdity in what was just said that I'm not even sure where to start in addressing this. Father Mawdsley would have us believe that we have to reject canonizations because some perverted Secretary of State was working in the Vatican. Canonizations are infallible. And if your rad-trad conspiracy theories, many of which may well be true, but if they cause you to reject canonizations, then you've lost the plot. You think you're a hero of the faith because you're a traditionalist, but you're just a Judas, if that's what you're doing. And there's a lot of people out there who think that their traditionalism will save them from the wrath that is about to come upon the world. It won't. So please listen to me when I say that. That won't save you. And I say that as a traditionalist myself, that traditionalism will not save you. But anyway, back to what Father Mawdsley was saying here. He says he's got this bone to pick with the word light. And I feel a bit silly even spending airtime here addressing this because of how puerile it is. You might as well take issue with the word the. I mean, yeah, it can be used to refer to evil things or to good things. But when it comes to the word light, how about this? Sacred Scripture. This is the message we have heard and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. 1 John 1:5. While I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. The Gospel of John, chapter 9, verse 5. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness is not overcome it. John 1:5. If we walk in the light, we have fellowship with one another. The blood of Jesus, the Son, his Son, purifies us from all sin. Believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of light. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights. Declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. So is the New Testament also a disgusting Luciferian revelation? Father Mawdsley points out that Jesus had a human will and a divine will. Let's talk about that next. I won't even answer the rhetorical question I just posed because of how absurd it is. Father Mawdsley claims that Luisa's revelations contradict the truth that Jesus had a human will and a divine will, but the opposite is the case. Jesus explicitly confirms that truth to Luisa. Let me share what he himself said in these revelations. Jesus said to Luisa, this is from the passage in July 19th, 1928. He says, I had a human will. Luisa, sometimes herself, she's a fallible human being. Just like us, she would sometimes speak erroneously in the volumes, and then Jesus would come in and correct her. And this is just one of countless proofs of the authenticity of the revelations. If Luisa spoke theologically inaccurately, Jesus would come in and correct her. Like in this case, I don't have the whole passage in front of me, unfortunately, but she said something about, she kind of neglected to consider in something that she said that Jesus had a human will. So he comes in and corrects her. He said, I had a human will. Also, there's all these other cases where he would correct her. Like in one time, Luisa was kind of excessive, getting a bit of excessive in her prayers, and she prayed, I want to have the faith of Jesus. I want to have the greatest faith. So she prayed to have the faith of Jesus, and then Jesus came to her and said, I didn't have faith. I'm God. And that's weird for you to hear if you haven't taken an advanced Christology course, and Luisa she had no education at all, so she certainly hadn't taken those. But for those who have taken an advanced Christology course, you probably read, in the Summa or somewhere else that actually it is true. Jesus had no faith. He had no faith and no hope. He only had love, because he always had the beatific vision, so he couldn't have belief because he always saw, and he couldn't have hope because he always had everything in his possession, therefore he couldn't aspire to attain anything that was not yet already his. Anyway, Luisa didn't know that, but So she writes, and so I'm getting digressed here. But anyway, Jesus would correct Luisa when she made errors. So he's saying, I had a human will. And then in another passage, Jesus tells Luisa that his will, the divine will, that is, the will of the Father, which he also has, of course, animates everything with its light, but does not destroy or change things. It places from its own, it communicates the variety of colors, the diversity of sweetnesses, making things acquire a virtue and a beauty that they did not possess. He's comparing the divine will to the sun, which does not eradicate what it touches. It brings out its full vigor. And he says, so my divine will is, without destroying anything what the creature does. On the contrary, my divine will animates them with its light, embellishes them, and communicates to them its divine power. So the purpose of these revelations is not to say that divine will destroys the human will. Of course not. It's actually quite the opposite. Your human will is more embellished, more invigorated by the divine will. The point is the human will is no longer operating independently of the divine will in what Jesus is calling us to through these revelations. The call is for the human will to be handed over to the divine will so that it can be animated by the divine will. Just like your body is animated by your soul. And that doesn't make your body, that doesn't deprive your body of what it is. You know, when you wake up in the morning and suddenly your soul is able to animate your body as opposed to just kind of your biological nature, that doesn't make your body less your body. It's more your body when it's being governed by a rational intellect. Analogously, the same thing is the case with the soul and the divine will. The human will is called, in terms of its greatest calling, that is, to be animated by the will of God itself. And this is what Pope St. John Paul II talked about with the Holy Spirit becoming the soul of your soul. That's in his actual homilies. Okay, moving along here. These sentiments here, and this is just a couple excerpts here, but these sentiments from the Revelations were the same ones that Luisa herself was left with. In Luisa's own words, she writes, Jesus wants our will alive. So she's contradicting those who would say that, no, the human will just has to be completely dead. And yes, there's cases of hyperbole in her revelations. And those who don't know anything about her revelations and just mine out these juicy details to condemn, yes, they're going to scandalize you because they don't know what they're talking about. But those who've read the whole corpus of the revelations, as I have many times, they're aware of the counterbalancing themes in there. So Luisa, in her own words, she writes, Jesus wants our will alive so that it may feel all the good as his operating will lays its act in it. The human will becomes the residence of the divine. It gives all its freedom to dominate and do whatever it wants. This is a letter she wrote to someone. And then in the volumes themselves, but in Luisa's own writing, she writes, she confesses, oh, how I would love to destroy this littleness of mine so that I might not feel anything other than the divine volition alone. But I understand that I cannot. So she's always completely open and honest. She says, oh, I'd love to be just destroyed so that everything's just the divine will in me. But then she says, no, Jesus does not want that my human will be destroyed. He wants it little but alive. And this is the exact same thing that St. Therese of Lisieux repeatedly says in her mysticism, who Pope St. Pius X said is the greatest saint of modern times. So if you're going to condemn Luisa for this, you got to condemn a whole slew of other mystics, including the greatest of canonized saints. And we'll get to more about that in a moment here. Anyway, Luisa writes that Jesus wants to work inside of a live volition, which is another word for will, a live human will, not a dead one. Okay. Let's look at that excerpt from Volume 9 that Father Mawdsley had on the screen on this video there. I've got a screenshot of the video up on my screen. I'm not sure if that's high enough resolution for you to be able to read or not. First of all, by the way, I see that Father Mawdsley is using the PDF of Volume 9 and the other volumes that I made. I can tell by the formatting and the page numbers. So I assume that he's been to my website because that's where it's posted. As far as I know, that's the only place it's posted. But I guess he didn't bother to read any of the other clarifications any of the clarifications really that I'm sharing now, because all of them, you can find them on my website very clearly. Anyway, yes, this is an intense passage. Let me see if I can zoom in on it here. Anyway, this passage from Volume 9 about this mystical experience that Luisa is having. This is indeed an intense experience, and there are a number of passages like this in Luisa's volumes. But anyone who's acquainted with mysticism of victim souls in general, not just Luisa, not even just modern, they will see stuff like this all the time, including in canonized saints and blesseds mysticism. Please read St. Gemma Galgani or St. Lidwine or Blessed Conchita or Blessed Dina Belanger or Padre Pio even, St. Elizabeth and the Trinity, St. Faustina, Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, so many others. There's always phenomena like this permeating the mystics. But what they're describing, these are not physical phenomena. They're not describing a physical encounter that they have the details of here in their writings. These are mystical experiences. They're full of symbolism. You have to be able to see that. The people who look at these descriptions, and like Father Mawdsley, they just, and I'm quoting him verbatim, they say, "Oh, disgusting." All these people are doing is proving that they've had their nose in theology books their whole lives, and they never bothered with mysticism. But mysticism is essential. If these critics were acquainted with the mystics, they wouldn't be so fake, phony scandalized by passages like this in Luisa's volumes. But the other noteworthy thing I want to point out here about this passage is that Luisa was so zealous, more zealous than any mystic I've ever read before, to make sure that that the mystical phenomena she experienced were not demonic. I mean, she's repeatedly, we've got this, she just says, I don't want anything to do with the devil. She's and there's another passage somewhere, I don't have it prepared before me right now, but Jesus appears to her and she says, in case you're the devil, make the sign of the cross with me, pray this prayer with me. She's so zealous, and her spiritual directors are so zealous, one after the next, and it's all providential, of course, because God, Jesus, wanted to make sure that absolutely no critic would have any ground to stand on to claim that these revelations are demonic. Every single diligence was accomplished to make sure that could not possibly be the case. And speaking more generally about doubts, I'm addressing a couple issues here, but if you just pick up Luisa's volumes and read them, you'll find that she herself struggled with all the same temptations and doubts and concerns and difficulties that you might have in first learning about the gist of Luisa's message. And those volumes themselves, the volumes themselves, they address all the difficulties better than I ever could. So if you just dive into these revelations, you'll be satisfied. The people who are always angry and always finding something to be ticked off about, they're the people who've never actually really dove into these revelations. Everybody who does, their life is transformed. Okay, but anyway, back to the question of the human will and the divine will, because that's ultimately what all of this is about. That's what this objection that Father Mawdsley gives is about. Before I get into more detail on them, really quickly, I want to remind you that we're talking about volumes here. And the volume I just had up on the screen, these are volumes that the Church has already declared to be free from heresy. St. Hannibal de Francia gave his Nihil Obstat to the first 19 volumes of Luisa's Revelations, and every single one of those 19 also has the imprimatur from Archbishop Joseph Leo. So any individual priest or theologian or apologist who accuses those 19 volumes of having error in them, he's contradicting the ecclesiastical authority of the Church on this matter. And it shouldn't be difficult to determine who to side with here. And by the way, for those who are, I'm not saying I agree with this, but for those who are suspicious of everything post-Vatican II, these imprimaturs are from the 1910s and 1920s. This is an extremely solid and reliable time of the Church as far as imprimaturs are given. They were not given to anything with any possible problems in them. And that's the decree of the Church. All right, if you want to condemn Luisa's revelations because of what they say about the need for the human will and the divine will to be so united as to truly have the human will living in the divine will, then you've got to condemn a lot more than just Luisa. And let's go ahead and share some excerpts here about that. You've got to condemn St. Faustina. St. Faustina wrote in her diary, as approved as you can possibly get. I mean, we got a canonized Saint Pope dedicating his entire pontificate to the divine mercy revelations. And Jesus, in these revelations, says the same thing that he says in Luisa's. And Faustina herself, writing about the divine will, says that your power works through me and takes the place of my feeble will. This is what Faustina is writing is actually more bold than what Luisa writes. Because remember, as we just said, Luisa's, and this is maybe you could say this is maybe hyperbole or something, but it's true hyperbole if that's what it is. We're seeking for this divine substitution. We're seeking for the divine will to really, in a sense, take the place of the human will. And that's exactly what Faustina is saying. Perfectly in accordance with Luisa's revelations. And it's not just Faustina's own words. Jesus himself says to her, "Host, pleasing to my Father, know, my daughter, that the entire Holy Trinity finds its special delight in you because you live exclusively by the will of God." Meaning you're not living at all by the human will. It still exists. It's still alive. It's still active, because quietism is a heresy. And there's no Luisa's revelations repeatedly refute quietism. Maybe I'll make another video on that in the future. If I try to talk about that today, this will be many hours long. But anyway, the human will is still active and alive, but it's handing over its independence entirely to the divine will. And this is confirmed by Jesus' words to Faustina. Jesus even told St. Faustina on this retreat, and if you flip through, let me see, I think I've got her diary. Yeah. If you just take Faustina's diary, and if you just flip through it really quickly, it probably won't show up on the camera right here, you'll see one page with a big, huge X through it. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that right now. That's all right. You'll see one page with a big, huge X through it. And this was like the turning point in her life when Jesus says, on this retreat, you will cancel out your will completely. And instead, my complete will shall be accomplished in you. And that is the call of all of us. And that is also the essence of Luisa's revelations. Okay, moving on. St. Elizabeth of the Trinity. There's other ways of describing this gift of living in the divine will, this total animation of the human will by the divine will, which is the essence of Luisa's revelations. It's also sometimes called the divine substitution, being a living Eucharist, a living host. There's other names as well, but it all basically means the same thing. It's certainly seen in St. Elizabeth of the Trinity. A divine substitution, a substitution of yourself for me, Jesus that is, so that my life may be nothing more than an infusion of your life. That my life may be nothing more than an infusion of your life, Jesus. Elizabeth of the Trinity is asking to be a living host. There's multiple cases in St. Elizabeth of the Trinity's writings where she would ask a priest, and it seems like heretically bold, but it's not. This is a canonized saint. She's asking the priest to please consecrate me in the host, so that as the host is consecrated, she would write this in letters to priests, begging them to do this, because she believed it's real. And that's exactly what Faustina and Luisa and so many other mystics are saying, that we can be this living host, not by a literal transubstantiation, of course not, only the Eucharist has that, but by nevertheless a real type of transconsecration is what St. Faustina referred to it as. Anyway, I digress. Okay, Blessed Dina Belanger. Jesus told her, I wish to deify you in the same manner that I united my humanity to my divinity in the Incarnation. That's about as bold a claim as you could possibly imagine, isn't it? And it's not from Luisa, it's from this beatified mystic, who I am sure will soon be a saint. And Blessed Dina describes this event as saying that Jesus replaced my will with his own. So you want to condemn Faustina, St. Faustina, St. Elizabeth, Blessed Dina Belanger? Because you're going to have to if you want to condemn Luisa for this same thing. Jesus replaced my will with his own, and then I felt a great strength that urged me on toward good and compelled me to refuse him nothing. This replacement of wills, it's real. Moving along still further. St. Maximilian Kolbe, of course, we all know he was all about Marian consecration, but what was that all about? The will. The transformation of the human will into the divine will through the mediation of the will of Mary, which itself was perfectly merged with, you guessed it, the divine will. He said that we are called to be annihilated in her. And yes, this is extreme language. Perhaps you could say this is hyperbole as well. But again, this is a canonized saint here, saying this, that we are called to be, through Marian consecration, annihilated it into her, changed into her, transubstantiated into her. And even Luisa doesn't use that. Even Luisa's revelations don't say that. Don't go that far. That she alone, that Mary alone, remains in us after our consecration to her. And he says that the essential component of such a transformation consists in conforming, merging, and uniting our will with Mary's. Why? Because undoubtedly her will is fully joined to the will of God. Therefore, we need but unite our will to hers. All right, I'm sharing with you a lot of quotes here. And you can find all of these citations and original sources for all of them and tons of other quotes in my 2021 book, Thy Will Be Done. But let me move on here. Don't have time to read all of this. Another mystic, Blessed Conchita. She, this is, super abundantly clear in her revelations, and she received even more revelations from Jesus than Luisa. She was another 20th century mystic, and her spiritual director was also, and not a canonized saint like Luisa's, but he's a servant of God, Archbishop Luis Martinez, an extraordinary Mexican mystic. Blessed Conchita, wife, mother of, I think it was 9 children, and an extraordinary saint. She was given this grace of mystical incarnation, and Jesus specifically says to her, it's even greater than mystical marriage. So if you're going to call out Luisa for saying this gift of living in the divine will is even greater than earlier sanctities, you better be willing to condemn a whole era of mystics. But please don't, because you're getting dangerously close to blasphemy of the Holy Spirit when you decide that God has just abandoned the world for a whole century. Do not go there. Anyway, Blessed Conchita, told by Jesus that this grace of mystical incarnation, and I've got tons more quotes from Conchita in the book. But anyway, it's clear, it's beyond obvious that the same exact gift of sanctity, of living in the divine will, is referred to in Conchita as Luisa. Okay. Now, let me get some water there. Now, I know what a hardcore rad trad traditionalist might be saying at this point. They might be saying, hold on, everybody that you just quoted, Daniel, they're all 20th century mystics. And don't you know that God abandoned the world in the 20th century? Don't you know that our calling is just to pretend we can turn back time and just erase the last 100 years? No, they don't say it exactly like that, but that's often the unstated premise in their argument. And it's, of course, utterly absurd. And as I said, it is dangerously close to blasphemy of the Holy Spirit to imply that. But I will, nevertheless, I'll play their game for a minute here. So let's go back even further. Let's go back before the 20th century. St. Alphonsus Liguori, doctor of the church. He was born in 1696. He wrote, let me abridge this and not read the whole thing there. It's on your screen. You can read it. He wrote, our Lord himself teaches us to ask to do the will of God on earth as the saints do it in heaven. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I have to pause there. He, like all the saints who really commented on this, that's the whole part 1 and 2 of my book. They realize the Our Father means something. It's a divine calling, and that every word of Jesus Christ is an absolute guarantee, especially the climax, the greatest petition of the one and only prayer he taught and promised and commanded us to pray, which is both a promise and a prophecy. But anyway, all the saints who really meditated on this and wrote on it realized this, that everything is in this petition, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We must pray that without qualification. Jesus commanded us to do so, to pray that we can do the will of God on earth as the saints do it in heaven. And how do the saints do it in heaven? They don't sit there just trying to figure out God's will and then exerting their effort greatly because they really want to sin, but they realize they have to do the divine will, so no, that's ridiculous. God's will is their will. They have no desire for anything but God's will. They are perfect incarnations of the divine will in heaven. And that this Our Father prayer is calling us to strive towards that even on earth. Of course, there's many things that are reserved strictly for heaven, the beatific vision and all that flows from that. But the accomplishment of the will of the Father can be accomplished on earth as in heaven. Otherwise, Jesus is a liar by teaching the Our Father, and that is blasphemy to call Jesus a liar. All right, back to St. Alphonsus here. St. Alphonsus taught, he's a doctor of the church again, he taught that conformity with the divine will signifies that we join our wills to the will of God. But uniformity means more. It means that we make one will of God's will and ours, so that we will only what God's will, that God's will alone is our will. And that looks like it's taken directly out of Luisa's revelations, but it's not. It's from a doctor of the church who was born in the 1600s. And this is a valid case of development of doctrine. I hope the no traditionalists are saying at this point that we have to reject St. Alphonsus Liguori as a modernist. This is a valid development of doctrine, and of course we know that that's a valid thing. It's used so blasphemously today by these wolves in sheep's clothing in the Vatican who want to bless sin and all sorts of stuff under the guise of development of doctrine. But that's a contortion of the true development of doctrine, of how the development of Catholic sacred tradition does work. It works over the course of centuries with saints and doctors, and it gradually builds up the faithful's understanding to the full measure of what was always in public revelation to begin with, but which needed to be rendered more explicit over the centuries. I talk about this in great detail in the earlier parts of my book, Thy Will Be Done. Anyway, the St. Alphonsus, Doctor of the Church, he was helping to move the Church forward in this particular understanding, a very important one, because in the era of the scholastics before him, it was usually thought that there's no such thing as uniformity with the divine will, beyond conformity, I should say. But St. Alphonsus is explicitly declaring that there is a huge difference between them. And guess who he's contradicting by saying that? St. Thomas Aquinas. Yep. In the Summa, Aquinas says very clearly that the relationship of the human will with the divine will, it's limited in scope to mere imitation. We have to look at the divine will and try and figure out what it wants and then try to exert our own independent moral effort to do it. And that's, of course, very virtuous. That's wonderful. But St. Alphonsus is explicitly contradicting him. And he's saying that, no, we can actually now be truly merged with the divine will. We can be actually fused with it. We can make one will of our will and the divine will. And if you think it's just St. Alphonsus, is not. I just, for the sake of time, I'm excluding all this from the video today. I've got so many other saints throughout sacred tradition who developed this understanding of the uniformity with the divine will. Please take a look at the book. Now, I am a Thomist. St. Thomas Aquinas, I will absolutely declare him to be the greatest theologian in the whole history of the church and the greatest philosopher in the whole history of the church. I am a philosopher. That's my job. That's my career. And I am still convinced that Thomism is the best system. I am a Thomist. It's the one that I hold. It's the one that I teach to my students. But even I, as a Thomist, I'm willing to concede that Thomas was wrong in some things. And this is one very important thing in his philosophical theology that needed to be developed. And it wasn't the only thing either. The Holy Spirit made sure that happened in the continuation of sacred tradition after Aquinas. Now, there's a lot more I could say about this. There's so many more saints I could go through, but let's move on here. Elsewhere in this video that he posted, Father Mawdsley shares a screenshot and some other material from one of those bogus divine will promoters that I mentioned before. And let me go ahead and cue up the point of the video where he does that. Oh, sorry, it keeps changing the timestamp on me. Let me pause here. Okay, here we go.
But to show us every command can be kept, and he was obedient even unto death on the cross. So it shows us that human nature is perfect. It can be perfectly subject to God. But in our fallen state, we cannot. And yet Judaism, not understanding that Christ has shown the perfection of creation and human nature, Judaism denies original sin. It says it's a monstrous teaching. There is no original sin. And then Kabbalah puts the blame for the mess of the world onto God and says we have to repair God, and through all sorts of esoteric garbage that they attempt to do that.
One of the great things you show throughout this book, though, is that...
All right, actually, let me pause. I don't know how much he talks about this in this excerpt, but he's certainly putting it up on the screen there, this outlandish stuff. So he's got a couple points on the screen. It's just the one that I have in mind right now is already gone from the screen. But anyway, he says, asserting will before word is a satanic lie, he has up there. And I'm not sure what that's exactly supposed to mean. I don't see a point in putting word and will in opposition to each other. We need both. Jesus is the Word of God, and he always did the will of the Father. I'm confused as to why we need to put those in competition with each other. But he also has this utterly bizarre diagram on the screen, trying to relate Luisa and Joseph and Miriam and Yeshua. Let me just share that on I think I've got the screenshot here zoomed in. There it is. Yeah. I don't know where on earth he found this claim of Luisa being part of this earth, air, water, fire thing. I don't know. I have no idea where he even found this. I mean, it is comical. I've never. There's nothing even remotely like this anywhere in Luisa's revelations, and I've seen a couple really bogus divine will promoters in my day, and I've had to really call them out, and I have, and I always will. But even I've never seen this before. This teaching right here. So, I don't know. Father he must have searched really far and wide to find this this particular thing that even I have not managed to find any evidence of anywhere. And anyway, earlier also, he's sharing this thing that seems to imply that Luisa was Jewish. Let's see. No, it's being covered there. Let's see. I don't know if that's exactly what he's claiming, Jewish ancestry, but let me just clarify. Luisa was baptized Catholic the very day she was born. I don't know how Father Mawdsley is trying to come up with any link whatsoever to Luisa and Judaism. That's outlandish. I mean, she was an Italian Catholic from the start, and again, I mean literally from the day she was born. Her father took her the day she was born breech, but miraculously her mother felt no pain in Luisa's birth. And her father took her the very same day to the parish priest to have her baptized, which, by the way, is how it should be. We should all bring our babies to get baptized the same day. That's my belief, at least. Anyway, Luisa was a Catholic mystic by the time she was 3 years old, and she accepted being a victim soul. Freely, openly accepted. Jesus appeared to her, asked her if she wanted to be a victim soul at age 12, I believe it was, and she said absolutely yes. So Father Mawdsley, he must have tried unbelievably hard to mine out just the most insane and outlandish promoters of Luisa while ignoring what 99% of Luisa's promoters are saying, and not to mention, of course, ignoring the volumes themselves. And this brings us to another major slander that's often levied against Luisa and the divine will. The critics claim that the divine will revelations have Luisa being another Virgin Mary. But that is a lie. Jesus even tells Luisa explicitly within the volumes themselves that this is outlandish. And let me open up that quote for you here. Jesus tells Luisa in response, and these criticisms that we're hearing today, they're not new. People were throwing them at Luisa for a while, even while these revelations were being written. And in response to them, Jesus tells Luisa, I was placing you near the sovereign queen, so that she, having lived in the kingdom of my divine fiat, you might imitate her, wanting to make of you a copy that resembles her. I'm sorry, I copied in the wrong translation here, but anyway, this works. It says, and I placed you in her hands, that she might guide you, assist you, protect you, so that you might imitate her in everything. And this seemed so absurd to them, he's referring to Luisa's critics here, and sinisterly misinterpreting the sense. Jesus is not mincing words here. He knows hearts. He realizes that these people attacking Luisa, they're not acting in goodwill. They're looking for quibbles because they simply want a reason to attack this. He says, they spoke as if I told you that you were as though another queen. And he says to Luisa, how much nonsense! I did not say that you are like the celestial queen, but that I want you similar to her. Just as I have said to many other souls dear to me, that I wanted them similar to me. But with this they would not become God like me. And Jesus has always called people to be similar to himself. And he's pointing out here, that doesn't mean they'll be God like me. That's ridiculous. Okay, and the quote ends here with, and then since the celestial lady, the Virgin Mary that is the true queen of the kingdom of my will, it is her task to help and teach those fortunate creatures who want to enter it, to live in it. Whose task? Luisa's? Daniel O'Connor's? No. It's Jesus's. Yes, he's the one giving these revelations, and the Virgin Mary's, not Luisa's. She is the secretary of this, not the queen of it, not the teacher of it, not none of that. Okay. So he's very clear as well, and there's so many other passages I could go through. I'll save it for another video. Jesus is very clear that the Blessed Virgin Mary alone is the only Immaculate Conception. I saw people commenting on this video somewhere, maybe it was Twitter, I don't know where I saw it, people saying, yeah, and Jesus said that Luisa was also immaculately conceived. This is pure slander. This is nowhere in Luisa's revelations. Jesus very clearly tells Luisa the Blessed Virgin Mary is the Immaculate Conception. She was the exception, the only exception. He clearly tells Luisa, you're a sinner, you're from common stock. I don't know where this stuff is coming from. I mean, yes, I do. I know exactly where it's coming from. It's coming from the devil. The devil is whispering in the ears of people, of these good Catholics all across the world right now, trying to tempt them to attack this because he, above all, does not want this to come to light. Anyway, back to my point here. The Virgin Mary is the queen of the divine will, not Luisa. Yes, there's various exaltations given to Luisa in the volumes, major ones. That's only natural. These revelations are extremely important. Luisa's the one they came through, and she also mystically suffered to bring these to reality. So yes, that's a huge deal. But on the other hand, it would be absurd for us to take issue with the great exaltations that Jesus gives to Luisa, because the whole point of what Luisa is called to is that all of us are called to that as well. Luisa doesn't have the singular and exclusive and sovereign privileges that Our Lady has. We'll never be the co-redemptrix. We'll never be the mediatrix of all grace. We'll never be the mother of God. But Luisa, being a sinner like us, being, conceived in common stock like us, we can receive anything she did. And that's why it would be just so silly to get all angry at the exaltations that Jesus says to Luisa, because all of us are called to that as well. That's the point of these revelations. We don't, consecrate ourselves to Luisa and look up to her as like the queen of this. No, we link with her, sure, and we seek out what she has first received. Jesus even speaks of Luisa at being at his left hand, not at his right hand. Only the Blessed Virgin Mary is at his right hand. His left hand, there's enough space in his left hand for all of us. This is not some weird thing trying to put Luisa on this pedestal up with the Trinity itself or with the Virgin Mary herself. No, this is an invitation to all of us to live in the divine will. And we have a simple choice. We can respond with humility and gratitude, or we can respond like Lucifer and rebel against God because of his graciousness, because of his goodness and his love. So please, consecrate yourself to the Blessed Virgin Mary. She is the one. She is the first creature after the fall to truly live in the divine will. And she is the one who will lead you to her Son, Jesus Christ. And I want to conclude this video. Looks like I've already gone over my threshold that I meant to end this by. Sorry. But I want to conclude this video now with saying just a couple quick things. First, I had played a couple clips on there from YouTube. I love Anthony and Rob. I've been on their channel multiple times, so I intend no opposition to them with this. I couldn't, it would have been too hard to edit out them from my response to Father Mawdsley. As for Father Mawdsley himself, I don't know much about him. As I've shown, he's obviously erred grievously here, and he has been very reckless. I'm not going to put on kid gloves and pretend that that's not the case. That is the case. He's the one who on his own accord chose to call these revelations from Jesus Christ disgusting and Luciferian. So no, I'm not going to apologize for responding strongly to that. And he could have decided to retract that or at least let it be after it was first published several days ago, but no, he published it again to his own channel. So yes, I'm going to respond in kind. But I will also say that what little I do know about his other works, I've seen some great material, and I don't want to speak against that. He speaks very well and beautifully from what little I've seen about how the Catholic Church is indeed the new Israel, and we need to refuse these Kabbalistic and dispensationalist and Zionist heresies that still look to the literal Israel itself, that literal slice of land and people, as the recipient of God's promised blessings in the Old Testament. That's ridiculous. The Catholic Church is the new Israel. All of those eschatological blessings that the Old Testament speaks of in the times of the New Covenant, that's not still with Israel. That's the Catholic Church. That's the church that Jesus established. And I talked about this also in Thy Will Be Done in the later parts of that. Very important point. So I thank Father Mawdsley for his writings on that. I haven't read them all, so I don't know if I agree with everything he says or not, but just the gist of it certainly is very important. I was, as I said, going to leave this, but since he re-uploaded the video, I realized I had to address it. But anyway, it appears also, based on a couple responses from Father Mawdsley, I saw it on YouTube comment and stuff, that he might be preparing to publish more attacks against Luisa, based on his, again, it's just people asking him questions online, what I've seen there, his responses. And if he does choose to do that, then I'll be right here to refute them. And I say this with absolute confidence, not because of anything special about myself. I'm sure Father Mawdsley is much smarter and holier than I am. I'm a knucklehead. I'm a nobody. But I do know that these revelations from Jesus to Luisa are true. I know that they're true. And I know that truth cannot contradict truth. So even though I'm nothing, I know that I'll be able to refute anything that's said against these revelations because of their authenticity. Just like I know that I'll be able to refute anyone who claims Catholicism isn't true, or Fatima isn't true, or 2 + 2 is 5, or a man can become a woman, or hell is empty, or whatever else. Truth always wins, and I am not going anywhere. So stay tuned, and please click that subscribe button so that you can be notified. And let's conclude with a quote from Jesus to Luisa. In fact, let's conclude here with the very same passage that Jesus concluded his thousands of pages of Revelations to Luisa with. I was just talking a minute ago about how the Blessed Virgin Mary is the queen of the kingdom of the divine will. Luisa did not know when her last message from Jesus would be. She didn't know the future, but Jesus knew. And Jesus chose to dedicate this last message not to extolling Luisa or anything like that, but rather he chose to dedicate it to extolling the Blessed Virgin Mary, his mother. The final entry of Jesus' revelations to Luisa. My love never stops. You must know that as my inseparable mother laid her maternity inside and outside of my humanity, so did I constitute her and confirm her mother of each thought, of each creature, of each breath, of each heartbeat, each word. And I made her lay her maternity in their works, in their steps, and in all their pains. Her maternity runs everywhere. If creatures are in danger of falling into sin, she covers them with her maternity, so that they may not fall. And if they have fallen, she leaves her maternity as help and defense to make them stand up again. Her maternity runs and extends over the souls who want to be good and holy, as if she found her Jesus in them. She operates as mother in their intellect. She guides their words. She covers them and hides them in her maternal love so as to raise them as many other Jesuses. Her maternity is displayed on the beds of the dying. And using the rights of authority of mother given by me, she says to me in such a tender tone that I cannot refuse her anything. My son, I am mother, and they are my children. I must rescue them. And while saying this, she covers them with her love. She hides them with her maternity to rescue them. My love was such that I said to her, Mother of mine, I want you to be the mother of all. And what you have done for me, you will do for all creatures. Your maternity extends in all their acts, in such a way that I will see them all covered and hidden inside your maternal love. My mother accepted, and it was confirmed, that not only would she be the mother of all, but that she would invest each of their acts with her maternal love. This was one of the greatest graces I gave to all human generations. But how many sorrows does my mother not receive? They reach the point of not wanting to receive her maternity and of denying it. Therefore, the whole of heaven prays and anxiously awaits that the divine will be known and reign. Then will the great queen do to the children of my will what she did for her Jesus, and her maternity will have life in her children. I will surrender my own place in her maternal heart to those who will live in my will. She will raise them for me. She will guide their steps. She will hide them within her maternity and sanctity. Her maternal love and her sanctity will be seen, impressed in all their acts. They will be her true children who will look like me in everything. Oh, how I would love for everyone to know that if they want to live in my will, they have a powerful queen and mother who will make up for whatever they lack. She will raise them on her maternal lap, and these will be the children who will make her happy, and will be her glory and her honor. And that's the end. Fiat. That's the end of 10,000 pages of revelations of Jesus to Luisa. So do you lack anything? As Jesus says here, I do. Consecrate yourself to the Blessed Virgin Mary. She will help you. She will make up for whatever you lack. Stay close to her every day. Pray her rosary every day. And she will not be outdone in generosity. God bless you.